issue, therefore, is will they have confidence in this budget, given that the projected deficit cannot be a real deficit, since the government is only cutting its expenditure by $88 million this year, and therefore it cannot drop from 3.8 to 3.4. It would have to cut its expenditure by $400 million to get to 3.4. And to use 2012 figures is as disingenuous as you could possibly get to try to give the impression of regularity and safety. I am prepared to explain that again if necessary, because I know it is technical, and Kerrie might have a better chance at making it political and clearer than I am. Dale, you good? You can't cut 3.8 billion by 88 million and get 3.4. You could put it simple like that. You cannot cut 3.87 billion by 88 million and get 3.4 billion. You would have to be cutting another 346 million. There is no evidence of any further cuts of 346 million. So that what you're effectively doing to make the figures look good, instead of subtracting from this column, which is this year in the Lord in which we live, because that's the year that the cut's coming from, you are subtracting from the column from the year before. So you can make next year March look good.
You can't cut last year's.
False accounting. False accounting. That's what it is. And I take it and I address it simply because those measures that I've announced that have brought confusion and panic and fear in terms of the lack of clarity on the tax measures and the manner in which the public workers in central government and ultimately statutory boards are being treated relate fundamentally to the same underlying theme here. That all three of these things that I have addressed today speak to a lack of confidence and to fear building in this country, rather than the very opposite happening. We need the government of Barbados to turn up for work and to lead. We need the Prime Minister to lead from in front. We need a Prime Minister to correct his mistakes if mistakes have been made, and to go forward and lead, because the country cannot go forward if there is an atmosphere of fear. And that is why the Barbados Labour Party is speaking as clearly as it is today. That is why the Barbados Labour Party is speaking to the issues and not giving you political editorial comment, because it is absolutely necessary that taxpayers and workers can see their way over the next few months with clarity, without having to wait to be ambushed in the middle of the night by measures. And we know that we are a state governed by the rule of law, and hence the need for the recall of Parliament to correct by law that which cannot be corrected by any other mechanism. I'd like to ask Kerrie if he wants to add anything, because I'm conscious that the complexity of the issues required me to break it down, and I hope that you will not simply reduce it to 2 or 3 column inches, but if necessary, explain to the public, because the biggest problem facing this country now is that fear also will not go unless there's an informed citizenry. And people, you are our only mechanism to speak to the public of Barbados other than through social media. And it is important that people understand why they're in the position that they're in September now, with no clarity as to what taxes they got to pay at the end of the month. And the perfect confusion of this government is reflected best in this, you know. What does this say here?
Removal of the reverse tax credit.
And what does he say in the actual statement? That's the point. So there's even a disparity between his words, a reduction of the reverse tax credit. The document says removal, but there will be a reduction. So that even between his words and the document, there is confusion, far less his words and other people's words. And it is an exercise now that is a budget that is causing serious panic, not only because of the substance of the measures, but because of the manner of implementation. And that's the fundamental point. And we're asking the government to bring order to the implementation of the measures and to the correction of the mistakes, such that the panic and fear that has enveloped the country can go away and we can start to rebuild confidence in how we get ourselves out of this crisis. And there is only one entity that can do that. That is the government, and in particular, the Prime Minister and the Minister of Finance.
Just one question. What does the grid say about the freeze on new hirings?
Sorry?
Because everything's
Yep.
So what does it say?
The same document reminds civil servants, both of them, that there is to be a freeze on new hiring. In other words, unless it is a critical situation that they can justify, they will not be allowed to fill any non-critical, established, or temporary posts. So for whatever reason that person may not be there, be it sickness, be it vacation, unless it is a critical post. And this is something that I want to address too. One of the unfortunate things about the implementation of this budget was that one of the first departments to start to implement cuts pursuant to these circulars, because this circular doesn't only speak to staff, it speaks to goods and services and transfers and supplementaries, was the immediate circular to the police force. If there is one department that is going to be needed above all else at all times in a country's affairs, and I'm not trying to make a case for anything to say or against anybody else, the police are specials. And if there is one reason for it, is that if there is industrial unrest, who do you rely on to keep order? Not to crack heads or to shoot people, but to keep order. If there is increasing crime, who do you rely on? The police. And that therefore you cannot apply a butcher's knife to the cuts across the public service in circumstances where a scalpel is required. You cannot treat an able-bodied adult person in the same way that you would treat a child who is 3 years old and barely come out of the stage of walking. Different people, different circumstances, different treatment. Different departments, different purposes, different treatment. And regrettably, what we are seeing is a crass approach to the issue of cuts even on goods and services, because remember the Minister of Finance said that there must be a 5% cut in goods and services across the board. But could the police department and the hospital take 5% cuts across the board, both of which relate to liberty and well-being of body and mind? They can't. And therefore, a government is expected to know that and to protect its people. The first duty of this government is to protect its citizenry, not to inflict on them unintended consequences because nobody sat down and thought the implications before the announcement of the budget, as the Prime Minister has announced in today's paper. I'll do that. Please.
Well, I think that Ms. Mottley has very lucidly and concisely put the budgetary issues. There is another matter which we have discussed and about which we feel very strongly, and quite frankly, a matter about which we are very satisfied will raise or contribute to the raising of alarm in Barbados. And that is the proposal, as articulated by members of the Cabinet, that they will be looking in the direction of instituting a policy of having economic citizenship in Barbados. Now, again, we don't wish to just make for political editorial comment. There are some things which we feel as a political party that are philosophically part of the underpinnings of this society. Barbados has historically been very clear that we earned our living the old-fashioned. We made our living the old-fashioned way. We earned it. The idea of accepting financial contributions from anyone who has been able to accumulate a few million or $1 billion by any means whatsoever. The idea of accepting economic benefits from anyone who has been able to accumulate a few million or $1 billion by any means whatsoever in exchange for a Barbados passport is not something that we are prepared to embrace. We feel very strongly that to go down the road of economic citizenship means that you grant an open door to every successful pirate, every successful gun runner, every successful drug trafficker, every successful slaver who has been able to ply his or her nefarious trade and then find their way to these shores in the hope of getting a Barbados passport. Countries which have done this before or followed this route before have often lost any reputation they previously had for being a brand or a place which is seen as internationally worthy and worthwhile. Barbadians today do not have to get a visa to go to the United Kingdom. We do not have to have a visa to get access to Canada and several other places. Countries who have gone this route of economic citizenship and subscribe to a concept of economic citizenship, pursuing a policy of granting status as a Barbadian to whosoever has a few $1 million, find themselves in a situation where their hard-working citizens, all of us, then become affected by the need to be in a queue to apply for a visa to go abroad. Now, we want to make it very clear to the government that this is a point on which the Barbados Labour Party says, "We'll and come again." It will not be acceptable for us. The legislation which currently exists, there is a Barbadian Citizenship Act. We feel that that legislation, far from being amended to allow for economic citizenship, should be strengthened so as to protect against it. And we also remind the Democratic Labour Party that they had previously conceptualized and promoted a green paper on comprehensive review of immigration policy, which in 2009 indicated that they were not prepared to look at economic citizenship as part of the way forward in the future. We feel that it is now necessary for Mr. Frundle Stewart to hold fast to any of the philosophical positions that had been the underpinnings of the Democratic Labour Party of Erskine Sandiford and Errol Barra, and even of David Thompson, and that we can't continue to just throw away the baby with the bathwater in this mad rush to adopt a bargain basement approach to politics. To prostitute this country for a mess of pottage is not something that we're prepared to be party to. And we say to the Democratic Labour Party, therefore, that the Barbados Labour Party will resist with every sinew available the effort that we understand them to be making to introduce this sinister form of governance to our shores.
Yeah, I think Kerrie has captured it very well. And the truth is, if you look at every budgetary measure, it seeks to undermine what is Bajan. You tell people to own land, make it more expensive for them to own land. You tell people to educate the children, make it more expensive for them to educate the children at university. You say that you must protect the underdog and the people most vulnerable, but yet you put the biggest lash on the people with the reverse tax credit earning less than $18,000. And finally now, you say that to be a Barbadian is the greatest thing, but you now want to dilute it and water it down by giving people that we don't know where to come from what they were about, and to make life difficult for ordinary Bajans. Okay, that's all right, Mike.
She got through to you at long last.
No, that's a tape recorder. Any questions before we wrap up?
Mm-hmm. I've been hearing a rumor that budgetary presentation and the way it's set up as a grid to give some credence to it was actually devised by the IMF, that Barbados is either in the IMF hands by stealth or there is some discussion going on. Have you been hearing these rumors? What are your views on that?
No, the IMF does regular consultations with Barbados. One of the problems is that for whatever reasons, the central bank did not allow the IMF to conduct its Article 4 consultation last year in 2012. So the last Article 4 consultation we have in Barbados with the IMF is 2011. I am not going to comment on those who feel that the reason that they were not allowed to come to Barbados in 2012, October, November, was because of an impending election. Suffice it to say that we missed a year, not because the IMF did not want to come, but because the government did not allow them to come. They are due to come later this year to do the consultation. What we do know is this: the Minister of Finance hopes to have an Inter-American Development Bank $100 million policy-based loan. And I have not addressed in depth here today the issues of growth, and I will do that at a subsequent press conference because I think you have enough to write on today. But remember, the only way Barbados can get out of this crisis is if we bring back growth to the economy. And the government has tried to announce some measures for tourism that we do not feel will have the impact. Tourism figures came out for yesterday, down to the end of August. Tourism is down 6.7% at the end of August, but the month of August again. Minister of Finance at page 32 says these funds, referring to the $50 million US for marketing, of which $13 million is to repay old debt. These funds will be sourced from a proposed $100 million US fiscal policy-based loan to be negotiated with the IDB later this year. So first point, it is not yet negotiated. Second point, the IDB will only lend policy-based loans if you have the stamp of approval of the International Monetary Fund on the policies being undertaken by government. Now that's a different thing from being in an IMF program. But the European Union and the IDB will require the sign-off, the stamp of approval. Barbados is going in the right direction and will achieve the right things. Only if that stamp of approval is there will you get the policy-based loan from the Inter-American Development Bank, or will you get the grant funding that the government is relying on from the European Union, which it also refers, I believe, in the Barbados Economic and Social Report as critical, the Barbados Growth and Development Strategy, as critical to their financing of the deficit. The question is that if you go on the IDB website, you will see a copy of the policy-based loan, but as Kerrie pointed out in our national meeting, you will see that there is an annex with no information that is said to be confidential. Now, the Minister of Finance has to tell us what are the confidential commitments that he has given to the Inter-American Development Bank in order to access this policy-based loan. Does it relate to layoffs? Does it relate to privatization? Does it relate to all of the things that all of a sudden this government is frightened to talk about because they know, as we know, that they have no mandate for any of these actions, having led the country to believe that all was stable up to February.
You're asking something. They're supposed to, the IMF is supposed to be in Barbados tomorrow?
No, they're coming here for, they'll be here during next week. Whether they come tomorrow or the weekend, I don't know what day. That's basically courtesy calls and to get baseline data. But they actually do the Article 4 calls. This is not for you to tell the public because I am not in a position to make official announcements for either the IMF or the government. But my understanding is that they get the baseline data next week. So they're meeting from all the bodies, and then they come back formally in end of October, November to do the Article 4 consultation. But go back and do the investigation. I don't know of any other year that the Article 4 consultation has not happened in recent memory. The governor told the people not to come. Sorry, the central bank. The central bank.
To be fair, I think this is a point that Mayor would want to be made. Mm-hmm. We have tried our best not to tread too heavily on the IMF issue.
That's right.
Especially in the context of what Chris has admitted with respect to the appearance of flight of capital. And frankly,
delicate.
Even though it may appear to be good politics for an opposition,
we are all Barbadians. The IMF thing leading to, especially in the context of a Minister of Finance saying there's a loss of confidence and capital disappearing, only exacerbates that fear.
And we have not addressed it.
And we really haven't been,
for good reason. Because at the end of the day, all of us can be imposter.
Exactly. Now, Ms. Mottley, you're saying Parliament has to come back to correct this mess. What options do you have as the opposition? I mean, you're going to say, okay, everybody, let's go and bombard Bay Street and protest. What are your options?
Our role at this stage is to enlighten.
Okay.
We will continue to enlighten, but we will watch and look at the situation clearly every week. At this stage, we're not giving ourselves, we're not imposing on ourselves anything else. Our primary responsibility to the Barbados public is right now to enlighten. Because as you would appreciate, I don't think you've heard me speak slower in a press conference, because I want to make sure that each of you, apart from anything else, apart from recording, that you understand mentally what is happening here. I have never known a budget to be as riddled with mistakes and ill-founded policies and incapable of smooth implementation as this one has been. It's not hard. I mean, and as the old people tell, if you start wrong, you can't end up right. If you start by ad-libbing the fiscal measures, then that should have been the first sign to us that execution and implementation of the measures was going to be a road to purgatory.
But isn't that a reflection on the public officers, because under the economic division to prepare this for the
You are assuming that they know.
Okay.
And off the record, the Commissioner of Land Tax ain't know nothing about this. The Ministry of Finance officials, the majority of them ain't know nothing about this. So I don't want to publish that because I don't want to put people in stress.
Yeah.
But believe you me, the majority of senior officials in the government never saw it. How could you impose us? If you went at the 0.7% solid waste tax, would the people would have tell him at first that this is $170 million you're imposing?
Can we get a copy of the memo?
Yeah, I got copies here.
In relation to Parliament, I think she's asking, being on a summer recess, a short break.
Short is a long break.
Long break, it's long leave.
Yeah.
It's long
7 weeks.
How do we get Parliament recall?
Government can always recall Parliament. If you recall when we had the crisis with the prison burning, Parliament recalled. In fact, Cabinet met on a Sunday night, and Parliament was recalled. It was on Easter recess. Parliament was recalled. That's what a government does. When a country faces difficult situations that are likely to lead to panic or concern, you take action. It's no different from a doctor. The first thing a doctor does when there's an accident, stop the bleeding. Tell the Prime Minister, stop the panic, stop the fear, correct the mistakes, get the implementation smooth, and let us proceed with the business. We don't agree with you on these measures. We don't think the measures will have the result that you intend them to have, but at the very least, correct what you say you want to do and make it executable, and implement what you say you want to do and do it without panic setting in.
You think the Prime Minister will acknowledge that? You think the Prime Minister and the Minister of Finance will acknowledge they made errors?
It's not for me to determine whether they acknowledge it or not. The public knows it. I know it. The accountants know it. The taxpayers know it. And the truth of the fact is found that people do not know what to pay at the end of this month for consolidation tax. People have been told that the 0.7% tax solid waste tax is a mistake. If it was a mistake, they would have given you the corrected figure the next day. And I want to make the point, and I should have made it earlier. In 1986, the Democratic Labour Party brought a budget that in its schedule sought to impose taxes on local vegetables. You remember that? Mm-hmm. And Mr. Arthur was then responding on behalf of the opposition and Shadow Minister of Finance. And Mr. Arthur brought that to the attention of the country. And it is to his eternal credit that then Prime Minister Errol Barrow refused to allow that budget debate to close without the corrected schedule being brought and put into the budget, because he understood that the Provisional Collection of Taxes Act made the budgetary measures law. This is not a casual exercise, you know. There's only one person who has the ability to cause law by what he says or she says, and that is the Minister of Finance or anybody speaking on their behalf in Parliament in a budget debate. So that in this instance, they could not have been corrected before the debate closed because, one, Don Villanis said it was a mistake, 5 days after, in terms of the solid waste tax. And two, when we spoke to the lack of clarity in here, they didn't take us on. But then they came on the 28th of August with the Commission of Inland Revenue selectively taken out an ad, I think, in only one paper. Not even in every single newspaper. And then there's the other issue. I haven't addressed all of them. You want another one? There is confusion in the tourism sector as to what is meant by direct tourism services. The session hitherto was only available to accommodation sector within hotels. Now that you're saying that this new sector of direct tourism services will benefit, there are some car rental agencies that say 3/4 of their business is to tourists, but yet they are hearing that they may not benefit. Will restaurants benefit? Who constitutes direct tourism services? The VAT period starts from the 1st of October. These are real
So you're already saying
issues.
You're already saying it's a bits and pieces budget.
But I said so. I said it was a lucky dip budget. I said it was quoted to the wrong person.
But that's not the
wrong
headline.
speech delivered
The
at the
headline
wrong.
is take charge, not it's a bits and pieces.
That's right.
budget.
Lead.
Lead, take charge.
Inspire
stop the
confidence.
panic.
Stop the fear. Stop the panic. So correct your mistakes.
Lucky dip.
Parliament is due to come back on the 15th of October. But the essence is this: correct your mistakes. And two, implement properly. Because the implementation has been a recipe of a perfect confusion, a perfect contortion of actions and confusion. There's a glitch. Everything a glitch. The August thing is a different thing from the budget. Everything the August thing for the different thing. I mean, even down to this, Mike. You realize that everybody, your hand get tired? Acting. But you could have said all officers acting with the exception of the head of the civil service. And him, he's acting DFE. So you would have that would even be perfectly correct. The Prime Minister, Stuart, met with all acting heads. Because that's what it is. All acting heads. And then what do you end up writing? That Warren, who spoke forthrightly yesterday on the vast stats, I heard him end up saying, I'm reminding the Ministry of Civil Service, but look, the law says that you're not supposed to keep a post vacant for more than a year.
Yeah.
And people get a legitimate expectation after that. And then there's the other one that nobody's mentioned. That there's a grandfather clause that anybody who was in position on December 2007 for 3 years has a legitimate expectation and right to be appointed.
That's where I was coming to next, and I'm glad you're...
You can add it in.
The fact is that
Anybody who was in place
there may not be a legal
for
action
3
open
years.
for all of these people.
For 3 years, at December 31st, 2007, has a legitimate right, and in my view, a right to be appointed. So that anybody who is considered in the criteria, apart from being last in, first out, there is an absolute prohibition in respect of people who have had 3 years at December 31st, 2007, because those people are to be treated no different from appointed public servants.
Putting your legal hats on, you both in that field, do these people have...
A cause of action? That particular category that we just mentioned, yes. Isn't it law? There's a grandfather clause.
I agree with you.
Of course, Ron, just throw me check the dictionary with the word temporary.
That's
As I reminded you, temporary means not permanent, is what he said. And by his definition, for the time being. And by his definition, the most prominent of all temporary people in Barbados is the cabinet and the Prime Minister. Because you're only there for the time being.
at that time being, and this is the point, legally, that time being can be a number of years. When a,
Up to no more than 5.
now when a person has worked for 4, 5, or maybe 10, as some people have, and then find that they fall into this category, the legal right clearly starts to cut in.
So we good?
Yeah.
I just want, I know you want to hurry up.
We're
but
going to a
looking-
few-
Looking further now, economy-wise, Diane has just said that they've recorded 3.9% growth. Antigua, St. Lucia,
You got yours?
saying we're getting more flights for
You have
Yes,
one?
sir.
for the
You have yours?
season.
No.
Okay.
This is saying